Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Nick and welcome to Sci-Finatics live stream today. Thanks for joining us, Glenn. Much appreciated having you with us from on the USA. Cheers, mate. Much appreciated. So today we'll be talking about Star Trek Picard news, as always. We're certainly getting to the business end of the season. We've only got 3 episodes or thereabouts to go. So it'll be very interesting to see how things play out in the remainder of the season. Because up to this point, we've sort of, every episode we've kind of seen a little bit of a glimpse from in the past. We've seen Riker and Troy in last week's episode. They popped up in a trailer that premiered at the end of last year. We've seen 7 of 9 in trailers. We've seen bits and pieces from the show through it that have been scattered throughout trailers of the series since trailers started coming out for Picard. So now in these last 3 episodes or so, we're actually starting to see footage that we have no idea what it's all about. We haven't seen stuff before. So with that in mind, we've got some stills, some production stills that come out from CBS yesterday, which we're going to have a bit of a look through and see if we can get a little bit more of an idea and generate a bit of discussion about what might be going on in our next episode of Picard. So let's take a look at these images and see what we can see. So obviously first there's this shot which we had in this trailer for this week's episode, which was these, what I'm guessing, Romulan Jadvash monks. If I had to guess, I would say this is probably, don't quote me on this, but this is my interpretation. This is probably one of these flashback sequences we tend to be getting at the beginning of each episode. So it seems to be this recurring theme now in each episode of Picard. We begin the show with a flashback, whether that takes place 3 weeks ago or whether that takes place 15 years ago. The flashback is the way that these episodes are beginning. So I'm wondering whether this shot here of these monks, assuming they are monks, of course, I'm guessing they're all appear to be Romulans. So I'm going to say that they're potentially some sect of Jadvash Romulans. I'm not sure what they're doing here, but they've obviously generated some sort of, it looks like a table. It looks like a table in the middle of the desert. And obviously in subsequent shots in the trailer, there's some sort of shockwave that comes out from this table of energy. So I'm wondering whether we're going to get a little bit of a, hey DJ, how you going, mate? Good to see you too. Thanks for joining us in the live stream. We're just going over these production stills from CBS on the coming episode of Picard for this week. So yeah, whether this energy table that they've created obviously sends out some sort of shockwave, whether this is then resulting an altar. Yes, Glenn, good point, an altar. But altars normally have some sort of whether it's some sort of sacrifice or something. But this appears to be, whether this is the setup for the massive shockwave we've seen in the trailers, where there's like a gigantic nuclear explosion going off, ripping a planet to pieces. Whether this is kind of like the starting point in that event, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing this is probably going to be in one of these little flashback moments that we see, perhaps. Moving on to our next shot, we've got a shot of Elnor here looking suitably vague. He's obviously on board the Borg cube still. And he has no doubt been rescued by 7 of 9. So yeah, he's obviously quite grateful. If anybody's seen the little sneak peek or whatever that came out at the same time as the trailer for next week's episode, it obviously at the end of the last episode we saw Elnor activate the little Fenris Rangers keyring that he very conveniently found hanging under Hugh's desk. We didn't know at the time it was Hugh's desk. I'm fairly certain it was Hugh's office that he happened to be hiding under the desk in, but that was kind of a little bit vague. We obviously burnt so much, well, not burnt, but we were allotted so much storytelling time in last week's episode for the whole Riker and Troy angle. Probably there was a few little storytelling elements that happened on board the Borg cube that were maybe glossed over a little bit more. Hence, Elnor scattering under this desk in this sort of Romulan room, which we didn't know was Hugh's office at the time. But yes, obviously I'm guessing. Hence the little Fenris Rangers alert keyring. I agree, Glenn. Seven never looked better. Yeah, she's actually. I'm. You know, for a. I mean, what Jerry Ryan would be, I guess, probably 50 or in her early 50s now, I suppose. So she's doing very well for herself. I'm quite impressed with. I'm actually quite impressed overall at the acting of all of our returning classic characters, whether that be Seven or Data or Riker and Troy. I think they've all done a really amazing job in this series so far, and I don't think there's been ever. I was sort of perhaps a bit worried when I initially heard that these guys returning for the series, whether there was going to be maybe some awkwardness, maybe kind of their acting chops were a little bit rusty. But I think they've all done a really admirable job in this show so far. I think it's been really quite impressive, and I'm looking forward to the last 3 episodes of the show. Next, we've got our shot of Elnor and Seven. What do you guys reckon? Does this look like the... thanks, Zed. Yes, okay. Jerry Ryan is 52, and she's looking a very fine 52 as well. Does this room look like the Queen's cell that we saw when Picard and Soji and Hugh activated the spatial transjector thingy and they went through to Nepenthe? Does this look like the same room to you guys, or does it look like a completely different room? Because the entranceway to this room looks strangely similar. So I'm guessing whether this is the Queen's cell, as Hugh put it, or whether this is just another room. I mean, I'm sure they're reusing sets on the Borg cube, because I guess there's only so many environments you can build the actual sets for. So I'm sure they're kind of redressing and reusing certain rooms for different environments on this show, which obviously is a filmmaking practice. You create a couple of sets and then you can redress them, relight them, and have them appear as different environments. But I guess the way they're looking in this shot, they're sort of looking up, and if I had to, I think from memory that when the transjector thing activated, it sort of rose up from the ground and it was quite high. So whether they're in the transjector room here, perhaps. Obviously, Hugh has said at the end of the last episode, just before he tragically passed away, our poor buddy Hugh. I thought he might have hung around a bit longer, but obviously Narissa's evening, Marsom. How you going, mate? Good to have you in the stream. Poor old Hugh didn't last for as long as we perhaps hoped he would. So, whether his words to Elnor was that we had to have an XB. You'll need an XB to activate the Queen cell. So, luckily, 7 of 9 fits that description. So whether she will activate the Queen cell for Elnor so he can escape, we shall only have to wait and see till the other day. Hey, SC, how you going, mate? Glad to have you on board in the live stream today. What do we got next? We've got a shot of Soji. Looks like she's manning one of the bridge stations there on board the La Serena. We've got Raffi and Rios in the background there. I'm obviously this is back after her and Picard have got back up on the ship again, and whatever she's looking at, looks like it's got her a little bit worried, perhaps. And what do we got next? We got Soji and Rios and Raffi again. What is it? I'm trying to see what that thing is on the ground there next to Rios's leg. I can't quite make it out. It's sort of some sort. Let me have a quick look. No, can't make it out. It's some form of luggage or a box maybe. I know there's a lot of boxes and crates and things rolling around the bridge on the La Sirena last week when they Romulans had them in the tractor beam and everything was rolling around and the whole ship was vibrating. So maybe a few of his cargo containers have sort of rolled around a bit. It does look like from the looks of the background, there's far more crates and things stored in the background of this shot. It looks like they've got some cargo there. Perhaps if you look behind Rios in the background there of the La Sirena, it looks like there's a whole lot of cargo of some kind stacked against the wall. Now, I don't remember that being there in the background in previous episodes. Whether that's something they've acquired, I'm not sure, but I remember that area being quite open. When Rios was kicking his soccer ball around the deck previously, I think that stuff wasn't there. So I wonder whether that's got something to do with the new stuff in this episode on the back of a chair. Actually, this chair thing, yes, Sarah, there's actually some shots coming up which have what appear to be some chairs which we'll get to in a second that might be interesting. Jurati is looking suitably beaten and miserable in this shot. I think if any of you guys happen to catch some stuff which popped up on YouTube during the week, I think Jurati has been well and truly sprung in this episode. Her activities with the whole switching off of Maddox's life support, along with her general level of stress and anxiety, I think has finally broken her in this episode. She's looking very, very depressed. Got Soji taking her by the arm, guiding her out of sick bay, I think. She's not looking too happy at all. Yes, med bay. You're right, Sarah. I think this is. The chair and I don't remember seeing that sort of conference room table with the white chairs in the sick bay before. Maybe that was up against a wall or something we didn't observe in a past episode, perhaps. But yeah, I think I'm aware that. Yes, she's alive. So there's some clips in the trailer that came out with Picard talking to Jurati. So clearly the EMH has done his job and has saved her life despite she taking this toxic poison to disable the tracker that O made her swallow. Yeah, I agree, Glenn. Alison Pill has been doing an amazing job this season so far. She's a great actress. I remember watching her in a show called The Newsroom, which is an Aaron Sorkin series who did The West Wing, and she was fantastic in that. I think she's done a really good job of the not only the drama required and the emotion that her character has gone through, but also these great moments of comedy. I think she's come out with some great perlers of humour in this season so far, and I think Alison Pill, has got a very broad range as an actress. She does great humour, she does great drama. She's been a really good addition to the series, I think. So yeah, she's doing very well, and it will be sad to see her. I'm not sure whether she's going to end up in prison because I think there's a scene where Picard is perhaps talking to her and she's been sprung. Picard is saying, "You're handing yourselves into authorities. You've got to go and basically hand yourself into the police, for what you've done." So it'll be very interesting to see how that kind of plays out because it would be sad if she goes to jail and we never see her again. I think she's a good character, but she has to atone for what she's done at the same time. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out in the show. We've got our guys all sitting around a bit of a picnic table here. They've got these very industrial-looking picnic tables on the last arena. In the what are we calling it? A mess hall? Are we calling it a kitchen? It's sort of like it's a very industrial kind of kitchen mess hall kind of space downstairs, just below the bridge, where they obviously get their food out of the replicator and then sit on a very very uncomfortable looking picnic table made of wire mesh. But they're all sitting around. We've got all of them. So we've got Rios, Raffi, Soji, Jurati, and Picard. So I'm guessing maybe this scene potentially happens before we find out of Jurati's deeds, because she's kind of sitting there with them all kind of, maybe doing the whole Enterprise conference room routine. So it'll be good to. I miss the old days of of Picard sitting at the head of the conference table on the Enterprise and all the crew around him, spitballing ideas and all that sort of stuff as part of the show. And it looks like they're definitely having a bit of a brainstorm in this shot. So yes, it will be very interesting to see what is going on in this shot. So we've got Rios having a drink of something. We've got Raffi and Picard all looking a little bit stunned, and Soji and Jurati are nowhere to be seen. I'm wondering whether this is a shot as part of the secondary shot from this shot. So we've got Jurati and Soji coming out of sickbay looking quite miserable and emotionally wrecked, probably from spilling her beans and giving up what's been going on with her and Maddox and whatnot. And then we've got these guys here, seeing them come out, and this is maybe, I don't know, this could be when Jurati sort of says, "Yep, it's me. I killed him. I'm a piece of shit. Lock me up. Put me in jail. I deserve it. All that sort of stuff." I wonder. Yes, at least Rios didn't flush Raffi out the airlock. I kind of got the impression in that scene. I don't know about you guys. I'd be interested to know what you think, but I kind of almost got the sense when Rios was giving Jurati the third degree in last week's episode, saying, "I think it's Raffi, maybe she's got a tracker on her," all that sort of stuff. I kind of almost got the impression like maybe he knew it was Jurati, but he was kind of putting this massive guilt trip on Jurati to try to kind of make her fess up out of guilt. But he kind of, I felt there was maybe a slight sense of him knowing, because there was a little moment, I think, where Picard was talking to... No, sorry, where Rios was talking to Raffi, and he knew Raffi was talking to her son. Raffi filled him in on the whole son dynamic back on Free Cloud, whereas Rios was saying to Jurati, I don't know what Raffi was up to on Free Cloud. She could have had a Romulan tracker put on her. So I'm just thinking whether that whole spiel that Rios was giving to Jurati was kind of a way of guilting her into sort of coming clean almost. These are, by the way, Glenn, these are all production still. So these came out yesterday, I think it was, from CBS to promote the episode coming up this week. I'm not sure. I think you could take it both ways in terms of whether Rios genuinely thought it was Raffi, or whether there was kind of like a little bit of a little bit of trying to guilt Jurati into, spilling the beans if it, in fact, she had something to do with it. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I think Rios is more clever than sometimes he makes out to be. And we're still at our picnic table. We've got a lot of shots at our picnic table here in the mess hall, and it looks like Picard, and I'm not sure what they've obviously got a meal in front of them. I can't see what they're actually eating and drinking, but they're clearly having a bit of a heart to heart in this scene on their very uncomfortable picnic table. And I think this outfit that Picard is wearing, I think, was it, I'm just looking back at the chat, was it Glenn or somebody else that was mentioning, or Sarah perhaps, this outfit that Picard's wearing, it almost reminds me a little bit of the black undersuit that Picard wore when he was Locutus. It was like this very stretchy kind of fabric with a high collar and a V neck kind of thing going on. I'm not sure. I guess they're just replicating clothes on board the ship here. It's not like he has a wardrobe handy. I think they're just replicating fresh clothes as they need them, I guess. In their 3D printers. Did you guys catch that in my review for last week's episode, that in the sickbay when Jurati replicated the hypo spray with the toxin in it, it was like a 3D printer that had absolutely no dressings or anything whatsoever on it to make it look futuristic, to make it look different from a 3D printer. They just bunged a 3D printer on the table in the hey Dawson, how you going? Glad to have you in the stream, mate. Welcome. They just bunged this 3D printer on the table in the sick bay, and this is the thing that she replicated the hypo spray in. But yeah, there was absolutely no effort whatsoever from the props department to actually zhuzh up this 3D printer to make it look super futuristic, put anything in it that might make it look 24th century. It was just a stock standard 3D printer off the shelf that they were using here. And I thought, like, yeah, props department perhaps needed a little bit of a smack on the wrist for that one. Our next shot is, we've just got a reverse angle. Now, hang on. If you look speaking about replicators, if you look, yes, you're right, SC. The tables in this mess hall do look distinctly like prison tables, something you might see in an episode of Orange Is the New Black or something, perhaps. Now, if we look at our replicator in the background of this shot behind Soji, we can see it looks like a replicator. It looks like the replicators we saw on Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, all that sort of stuff. So it does show that the props department can, in fact, create a viable looking replicator. So yeah, it confused me why they needed to drag in a 3D printer and say that's a replicator. So yeah, same shot as last time, just the reverse angle. I'm trying to see what Soji's drinking there, eating there. Can't really. I think it's probably maybe a bowl of cereal. Maybe it's breakfast time on the La Serena. Yeah, so it'd be very interesting to see what these guys are talking about in this scene. Let's see. Yes, John, I agree. Yes, the 3D printer was just, yes, it was very glaringly obvious. There was no effort made whatsoever to hide the fact that it was a 3D printer. Oh my God, yes, Sebastian, you're right. There is a hole in the middle of the table for an umbrella. So obviously they've just got this table from some outdoor homewares store and thought, oh yeah, that looks like it might be a kind of an industrial table that they can just plonk on the deck of the La Serena, and we'll just put a little thing on the middle of the table to hide the umbrella hole. Oh, that's right. It's the Tribble cereal from the short trek. The short trek. That's right. for Discovery Short Trek. That was a very funny commercial. Right, now, okay. Now, what do you guys reckon these things are? Because we saw them in the trailer. They're these little kind of look like they're kind of like almost like, I wonder whether these are repair robots, because there's a shot of the Borg cube. Obviously, up to this point, we've seen shots of the Borg cube which have several places where half of the Borg cube is damaged and there's force fields in place. So I wonder whether something has been activated on the cube to initiate these little what are you going to call them? Repair bots or something? Little Borg repair drones, repair robots, something to that effect. And whether these guys are rapidly repairing the outside of the cube, because in a subsequent shot following this one, we have the Borg cube without the force fields on the outside of it, as we have seen in previous episodes. And it appears to be all repaired, and perhaps back to full operational state again. Maybe. We also see now. Is this sphere in the side of it? Remember in First Contact when the cube got damaged to a certain point, just before it exploded. Like a doorway opened up, and the Borg sphere, which was like a kind of a escape pod kind of thing, ejected from the center of the cube before it detonated. So I wonder whether this circular space in the side of the cube is the point for the Borg sphere, and does that mean we're going to see a Borg sphere come out of the center of the cube at some point in this episode? We'll just have to wait and see. We also had in this shot, in the trailer, a lot of Romulan ships warping in. So whether the cube has been activated, fully repaired, maybe the XBs are back in control again, and a whole fleet of excuse me, just take a sip of water. Maybe a whole fleet of Romulan ships need to kind of warp in as reinforcements to control the situation, because there was a whole almost a whole armada of Romulan ships warping into where the Borg cube is. So yeah, I wonder whether that's got something to do with that. We've got 7 of 9 activating a whole bunch of Borg control panels. What do you guys reckon on this shot? Do you think this is the Queen Cell? It looks a little bit similar. I was going back and looking at the Impossible Box episode, and the control panel that Hugh was activating when he activated the spatial it's actually difficult to say, spatial transjector. So I wonder whether this is 7 activating the trajector, or whether this is just 7 activating all those little repair drones, which then come out of the surface of the cube, and they're kind of repairing everything and getting the cube back to operational state again, so that the XBs can perhaps take back the cube from the Romulans, maybe. So yes, it could be either of that scenario. But whatever Seven is doing in this shot, she looks like she has great purpose and is very focused and very intense. So whatever's going on, she's super serious about what she is doing. So yeah, she looks a little bit. You're right. You're right, SC. She does look a little bit annoyed. Perhaps she's found out. Perhaps Elnor has told her that Narissa murdered Hugh in the last episode, and she's on the warpath because we've certainly seen Seven on the warpath before, haven't we? In the Free Cloud episode. We know what happens when you cross Seven, and we know what happens when you get on her bad side. She goes postal and starts taking out the joint with dual phases. So let's see what. I wonder whether. I wonder whether after this shot, we get to this shot where. Now, there's been a lot of speculation on online during the week as to whether this is a dream sequence or whether this is real. But it looks like the hoses that have come down behind Seven and the fact that her eyes have darkened is very reminiscent of the Borg Queen in First Contact, and also several episodes of Voyager. Because it was the fact that when the Borg Queen was able to, these hoses would come down and they would sort of attach, into her and all that sort of thing. And her eyes were very, they weren't dark like Seven's. They were almost like a metallic silver kind of color with the Borg Queen. So I wonder whether this speculation that's been going on online over the course of the last week indicate as to whether Seven does become a Borg Queen, whether this is just like a dream sequence. Maybe she has some, flashy images perhaps of her as a Borg Queen. There is certainly, I certainly hope that Seven isn't reassimilated into the collective and we never see her again. And she's, because part of Seven's journey, I think, much like to a certain extent Data and also Picard, is to be rid of her Borg history, to throw off the shackles of her assimilation. And she said to Picard in that very very poignant scene in the episode when they were in Free Cloud. We've got a new subscriber, Chip. Thank you for subscribing, Chip. Much appreciated. Glad to have you as part of the channel. So we definitely saw. Her as a queen. There's been a lot of chat about it. Don't know whether it's a dream sequence or not, but we shall certainly see coming up on tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode. Be very interesting, or Thursday's episode, I should say. Very interesting to see that. Now we've one thing I have actually got, which I'm not sure whether you guys want to have a chat about, is I was doing a little bit of research during the week about the title. I'm not sure whether you guys are aware or not. I'll just have a quick look at the chat just to see if there's any other points I need to talk about before we move on. Interesting theory, John, about the Seven, that Seven was released by the Borg Queen and to be taken back by the Borg as a queen with a knowledge of humanity. Interesting theory. Obviously, the Borg wanted Picard for that exact reason, to understand humanity, to have a human voice speak for them. So yes, it will be very interesting to see whether this is a Borg ploy to get to get more information about humanity assimilated into the collective. But I would be surprised if Seven's journey was to end with her being reassimilated. It's always been something she's been trying to get away from. And I think the fact that she's trying to been getting away from being reassimilated, she's been trying to put the shackles of her, as I said before, the whole scene with her and Picard, talking about she's trying every damn day of her life to try to become a little bit more human. Both her and Picard agreed that they never regained 100% of their humanity again. There was still like a little bit of themselves that were still a bit, trapped in the Borg psyche. But she's always been working hard to try to throw off that Borg background. So I would be very surprised if the writers of the show decided, no, we're just going to make her a Borg again. Even though she's been working so hard to throw that off and away and become more human and all that sort of stuff, and to be an individual. Nope, we're just going to make her a Borg again, and that's going to be her ending. I think the fans would be outraged if the end of Seven's story was to be reborgified again. I think that would be quite disappointing. And that's true, Glenn. Sometimes journeys don't end the way we want. But I would hope that if she does have to do something like this, it's for a much bigger and greater purpose. I think the way they killed off Hugh in the last episode felt a little bit like a Tasha Yar kind of death to me. I think Hugh, if Hugh had have gone down, activating the Borg cube, saving all the XBs, maybe dispensing with all the Romulans, and maybe, I don't know, Hugh becoming the Borg king. Maybe if he became the Borg king or something, and sacrificed himself that way to save all the XBs, that would be a very noble death. But just having the what's her name, Narissa, throw a dagger, which stabbed him in the neck and killed him. It I don't know about you guys, but it felt like a little bit of a Tasha Yar style death to me. A little bit of a death, an unnecessary death, a death without kind of full meaning and purpose. Just sort of one of those. Oh yeah, we'll just kill off Hugh now, But then again, it could be an interesting dynamic. We've now getting Hugh and Seven of Nine. Sorry, we're getting Elnor and Seven of Nine teamed up in this episode. So that will be an interesting dynamic to see how that plays out, because those two, I think, would certainly work well together. There's been a definite. There's a commonality there, I think. Seven with her Borg officiousness and her absolute kind of, she speaks her mind. Seven has never been one for beating around the bush about, she says it like it is, which is kind of very similar to Elnor's way of absolute candor with his Kuwait Malat upbringing. So there could be some interesting moments of humour perhaps coming out of this little team up that we've got going on with Seven and Elnor in this episode. And it'd be interesting to see if Seven takes Elnor under her wing as well in this episode, because she lost Icheb, and Icheb was like a son to Seven. So whether there's maybe Elnor could become the new Icheb replacement for Seven, someone that she can take under her wing and guide, and I think some people have said maybe Elnor becomes a Fenris Ranger. Surely the job of the Fenris Rangers are kind of a bit of they're like sort of like peacekeepers. Maybe they're peacekeepers of the sector or the galaxy, which reminds me of another type of peacekeeper, as in the Star Wars Jedi Knight peacekeepers. They were peacekeepers and guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy in Star Wars. And let's face it, Elnor kind of is a little bit like a Jedi. He's kind of got the sword thing going on. He's got the martial arts skills. He's doing flips off the walls, and he's got the training that is a bit Jedi-esque. So who knows? Maybe after the mission is complete, maybe Seven will take Elnor under her wing and make him a Fenris Ranger. Just looking. The artifact was in Romulan territory. Yep. So one thing which I was interested in when I read I don't know whether you guys have seen the episode guide for Picard. The title of our next episode, and for that matter, the last episode of the season, episodes 9 and 10, which is a double-parter, a part 1 and 2, for our last episode, is a episode title is called Et in Arcadia Ego. Now, what is Et in Arcadia Ego, you might ask? Well, Et in Arcadia Ego was and I've got a picture here, which I shall bring up. Et in Arcadia Ego was a French Baroque painting, circa 1637. And the translation of Et in Arcadia Ego, which was this famous Baroque French Baroque painting, basically translates as "Even in Arcadia there am I." I referring apparently to death, and Arcadia referring to what they determined in those days as utopia. So the phrase "Et in Arcadia Ego," and I have to also thank Linda B, who sent me an email during the week as one of my subscribers and sent me a link to this portrait. So thank you, Linda, for the collaboration there on this information. So yes, the actual phrase translates as "Even in utopia there is death." So this is essentially the title of our season finale, being a two-parter, which is entitled Et in Arcadia Ego, essentially translates as "Even in utopia there is death." Now, by utopia, I would kind of translate that as utopia being maybe the Federation. So if you replace utopia with the Federation, which obviously had, these grand ideals of, everybody, there's no poverty, everybody's happy, everybody gets along, the whole Gene Roddenberry philosophy of the 24th century and what that is like. You would translate that, I guess, as even in the Federation there is death. And if you look at these paintings, it's got basically the paintings are of, it's like a pastoral scene. We've got shepherds gathering around a tomb. There's another painting as well. There's a couple of artists in the French Baroque period that painted this Et in Arcadia Ego portrait. So yes, so whether it basically roughly translates as, and yes, very good point that I just saw from in the chat. Amelia, yes, there was death in Utopia Planitia. So you're right, Utopia. Utopia was is another word for Arcadia. So if you're saying even in Utopia there is death, Arcadia meaning Utopia, Utopia Planitia. This is maybe talking about all the deaths on Utopia Planitia. So yeah, very good observation, Amelia. Well done. Great insight there. So this is probably going to be something. Now, if we've got a tomb, as I said, we've got shepherds. It's kind of like a sentiment. If we look at the sentiment of this phrasing, it's showcasing the irony between sort of the shadow of death and the merriment of utopia, or sort of this ideal society. So I'm guessing this is kind of in reference to maybe the walls coming down on the Federation. We're going to perhaps find out the background behind the whole synth attack on Mars, the destruction of Utopia Planitia shipyards, the whole Romulan history of their prejudice against synths. I'm sure all of that stuff is going to be coming out very much in the next couple of episodes. So we stand by for a whole bunch of exposition. There's going to be a crap ton of exposition in the next couple of episodes, I'm guessing, where they fill in all these blanks on the storytelling that they've set up over the course of the last few seasons and so forth, and finally find out some. They're not going to drop it all on us in one go. Maybe they're going to kind of eke it out over the next 3 episodes, but it's definitely going to be a very interesting, ramp up towards the end of the season. And yes, there's just talking about you guys, whether there's going to be a bookending element to the story in terms of whether we're likely to see Data at the end of the season as well, because Data was very much in our very first episode of the season, and quite often storytelling will bookend story points. So the stuff which we saw in episode 1 with Picard's dream sequence, we had Data there playing cards, poker with Picard. We had the whole 5 Queen of Hearts thing going on. And part of the, obviously, journey of the season has been whether or not the single, whether Data's essence resides within Soji's positronic brain, and whether they can take a single positronic neuron from Soji's brain and implant it into B4, and then all of a sudden Data's back to life. I mean, we know that Data, we know that B4 has all of Data's information and memory in him. He's just too primitive a model of an android to be able to run Data's program. So I think what they established on Nemesis was that B4 was like, just to use a computer analogy, B4 was like trying to take trying to take a present day computer program, a 2020 computer game that needs ridiculous amounts of gig and memory to run, and it's got full high res high definition graphics and everything. Taking that program and installing it on a 1995 Pentium computer or something, the program just wouldn't run. It's so fast, the program wouldn't run. All the data would be there, for pardon the pun, all the information of the program would be there. If you had a hard drive big enough to store the information, you could put the program, you could take a 2020 computer program and install it onto a 1995 computer, and all of the digital information would be there, but the computer wouldn't be powerful enough to run the program. And I think that's what they established with B4, is that all of Data's memories and all his programming and everything was in B4. His computer, for want of a better term, was not powerful enough, and he didn't have enough memory, and his CPU wasn't fast enough to kind of run the Data program. But it'll be interesting to see whether, if they do at some point during this show, now whether it will be in the season finale, whether it will be something they will save to season 2 or even season 3 if there's a season 3 of this show, whether or not by implanting a positronic neuron from Soji, who is the brand new latest model android, into B4, whether that will somehow soup up Data's computing power, or B4's computing power, I should say, and the Data program will be able to be activated, and Data will be back with us again. That would be very interesting to see whether that plays out, because that's pretty much what at the beginning of the season they speculated in terms of what Picard's mission was. I think part of the reason why Picard is on this mission with Soji is because Jurati has given Picard this hope that that pretty much if we get Soji and if we're able to implant this positronic neuron into B4, maybe that will bring Data back to life. And I think that's what probably Picard's counting on. He clearly feels guilty over the fact that Data sacrificed his life to save him in Nemesis, and he's never really forgotten that and never really gotten over it. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not we get a payoff on that setup that happened in episode 1. Obviously, everything is kind of starting to line up towards the finding of the android colony, and obviously Maddox isn't with us anymore. But whether Jurati will have the expertise to do this or not is another question altogether. I mean, she might be in prison for all we know if she ends up handing herself into authorities on Deep Space 12, and ends up in a detention cell somewhere for her crimes against Maddox. Vinny, I agree. I mean, it seems like in our coming episode, Picard will be saying to Jurati, you have committed murder. You've killed Maddox. You're handing yourselves into authorities. We're going to stop off at DS12 and put you in the holding cell and you're going to confess. So yes, it will be very interesting to see whether she ends up in jail somewhere and that's it for Jurati for the rest of the season. But I would think if they're heading to a planet with a bunch of synthetics and they're heading to this location and it's supposed to be this colony that all of the synthetics are, being created on, thanks to Maddox in his lab. I mean, we need a cyberneticist to come along for that experience, because obviously there are things that are going to need to happen that are probably going to need the expertise of Jurati. So I think if Jurati is stuck in a jail cell on Deep Space 12 somewhere, I think there's a lot of bits and pieces that probably aren't, in terms of, what they need to do. They need expertise in that field. And I can't imagine, I don't know, is there going to be a whole lab full of cyberneticists on this planet? And Maddox was just one of them? I don't know. I mean, there's obviously been a little bit of chat here in the live chat about Lore as well. Whether Lore is somehow involved. There's been a number of different theories about Lore, because at the end of Descent Part 2, which is the last time we saw Lore on screen, Data says he has been deactivated and dismantled. Now, beyond that, we didn't really find out any more about Lore and where he was dismantled and deactivated at. Did Data keep him in his cupboard on the Enterprise D? Did Data move Lore to an off-site storage facility, much like Picard visited in the first episode? Remember, Picard visited in our first episode the Starfleet archives, where he had like a storage room which had all of his kind of keepsakes and knickknacks and treasures and all that sort of stuff in. Maybe Data had one of these as well, and maybe he kept Lore here. Maybe Lore was at the Daystrom Institute, along with, maybe Lore is in another drawer. B4 was in one drawer. Maybe Lore is in another drawer. Maybe he was deactivated and then there's been other people who've said, no, Lore is destroyed. Lore was destroyed when the Enterprise D exploded in Star Trek Generation. So if Lore was kept on board the Enterprise D and they evacuated the Enterprise D crew to the saucer section before it crash landed on Viridian, then Lore would have been blown up when the Enterprise D exploded. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding what actually happened to Lore, and we haven't really, beyond the fact that Data said he'd been dismantled and deactivated in that first episode of season 7, no more has ever been mentioned of Lore in a Star Trek episode since that moment. He wasn't even mentioned in Star Trek Nemesis when they found B4, which kind of surprised me a little bit. That when they showed up on the planet and they found B4 in pieces, why Picard didn't say, Data, could this be Lore? But that question was never asked. So I guess they probably didn't ask it because they were probably scared of alienating new viewers to the Star Trek movie rather than paying service to the fan audience. They probably say, we don't want to put references to Lore in because that then will confuse people who've come to see the movie and don't know anything about Star Trek Next Generation. So SC says Maddox activated Lore and Lore subverted Maddox. Yeah, it's possible. There are all manner of hints and speculation going around. I think there's so many theories circulating at the moment with reference to not only the Borg Queen, but we've got Data and Lore and all that sort of stuff. It would be very interesting to see. I'm sure there's elements of truth in all aspects. I think there's probably little glimmers of truth. Everybody's got a theory about Lore and the Borg Queen and Soji and who's an android, who's not an android. There's even been theories going around that that Jurati could be an android. That there's so many rumors circulating, and I think that that there's probably not one of them that is exactly the right answer. There's probably elements there's probably elements of both that are interesting in that respect. I've got to keep up with the chat here. Thanks for all the live chat too, guys. There's a lot of discussion going on, which is great. We always like lots of active discussion in the chat. And I also like super chats too. Feel free to super chat, please. It's a lot of work running a YouTube channel and doing this like a full-time job. So I appreciate any super chats that happen to come my way as well. They're always very much appreciated. Going back to the climax into the last 3 episodes, I feel reserve should be at least. I agree. Double D, yes. I can't believe there's only 3 episodes left of this show. it definitely seems like it's come so quickly. The ending, it feels like we've flown through the season. I almost feel like we should have been. It should have been like almost like a 12 or a 13 episode season. It kind of feels we're really ramping up to the end of the show now, and with 3 episodes left, it feels like there's a lot of questions still yet to be answered, and I'm sure we're not going to have them all answered. I'm sure they're probably going to drag out a few questions to season 2. They're going to answer some of our questions at season 1, but one of the elements of good storytelling is to keep your audience interested and activated in the show. Thereby, you always want to be answering some questions that you've posed, but then creating new questions at the same time to keep everybody interested and engaged. Actually, speaking of Janeway, Double D says yes, they create a 10-episode Star Trek Janeway. I always thought they should bring Janeway into Picard as a guest in the same way as they've done with Troy Riker and also Seven of Nine. Janeway clearly had a very strong connection with the Borg in Voyager, and there's a lot of activities that she experienced in Voyager with the Borg, and obviously the Borg are a big part of Star Trek Picard. So it seems like it might be an obvious choice to maybe for Picard to call on Janeway's expertise. Perhaps there's some sort of Delta Quadrant expertise that Picard needs, and Janeway, I think, was always a no-nonsense character that was willing to maybe bend the rules slightly from time to time, when the situation called for it. So I think seeing Janeway and Picard sharing the screen together in more than what is just a communication on a screen like we had in Nemesis. Obviously that they weren't even in the same room together in Nemesis when Janeway was the Starfleet Admiral to give Picard his mission orders. It would be great to see those characters together again, and I seriously hope that maybe in season 2 we maybe get a Janeway cameo. I think that would be a fantastic addition to the show. Obviously, we want to give all the classic characters and Next Generation cast a turn, but it seems like with the addition of Seven of Nine in this series, I think the producers seem to have no issue whatsoever in bringing back other Star Trek characters apart from Next Generation characters. Oh, thank you so much, John. Thank you so much for the super chat. I'll give you a here we go, a very big super chat. Thank you, much appreciated. Much appreciated, John. Thank you so much for that. So yes, it's fantastic to have all of our classic characters in the show, whether that be Picard, Riker, Seven of Nine. I'll take whoever they're happy to give us. I think it's fantastic that the producers are open to returning characters, whether that be from any of our Star Trek shows. It certainly adds an extra level of interest by the fans. And yes, so just to read your message there, John, thank you again for the super chat. Thanks for making my first live stream viewing on YouTube a memorable one. Keep up the theories, breakdowns, and live stream chat. John Mendoza from Los Angeles. Thank you so much, John. That's very much appreciated. As I said, running a YouTube channel is, it's like a full-time job. So, when you're putting out, say 2 videos a week and doing a live stream, there's, a lot of work and prep that has to go into it. So I really appreciate everybody's subscriptions and comments and likes and all that kind of thing to the channel. I always try to make my channel a positive one, and because there's a fair share of Star Trek Picard channels that maybe are a bit more negative in their outlook, and they tend to be very critical and cynical about the show. But I'm thoroughly enjoying Star Trek Picard as a long-term Star Trek fan myself, and having watched every series multiple times over since they have first aired. And I always try to be as positive and accommodating with my reviews of the show. And if occasionally there's a few little criticisms here and there, but I always try to do that with a jovial and constructive way, rather than just a very cynical and negative outlook on the show. Because obviously there's people who are aren't enjoying the show, but I always find it amusing that the people who aren't enjoying the show are always the ones that are most vocal and send heaps of messages. It's like, well, okay, if you're not liking the show, just don't watch it. Don't spend your entire day just posting in people's forums how much you hate the series and how it's rubbish and all this sort of stuff. Just don't watch it. And it's just But I always try to be very positive and very and have a good outlook on it, because it's not Next Generation or DS9 or Voyager, but storytelling has evolved over the years, and audiences are more sophisticated than they ever were. So I think that's important to move with the times of storytelling in modern media. But you also need to be respectful and pay homage and respect to what's come before. And I think, and I really get the sense that the producers of Picard have done a great amount to be respectful of Next Generation and what's come before. I don't feel they're just throwing everything under the bus. I got to say, like what they kind of did in Discovery's first season. I think there was a lot of course corrections in season 2 of Discovery, but I certainly think season 1 was far too much of a departure from what we know as Star Trek, and it's good to see that slowly the course is being corrected on that show. But I think they've definitely hit the right tone running with Picard. And it's good to see, it's good to see the producers paying homage, and and being respectful of the history of Star Trek. You can tell these guys are fans of Next Generation. I mean, there's so many Easter eggs and little hints and tidbits and bits of information that are creeping up into each episode that us fans are definitely noticing. So I think you can definitely tell that there is definitely a respect there with the show, and they're definitely. I think it's in good hands. I think, despite a lot of people being critical of Alex Kurtzman, I think the way this series has been handled has been a good one. So yes, so no, I agree with you guys. Yes, so Glenn, yes, I avoid the negative attitude of yes, few of those people who you've mentioned there in your comment. Yes, they definitely tend to be very scathing and cynical, and we try not to go down that road here. We try to keep it friendly, positive, and amicable, and and look at our shows that we love with a positive outlook. So yeah, I'm glad to see you guys are enjoying my channel and are very on board with my reviews and breakdowns and so forth, because I think when everyone's passionate about the show, everybody is enjoying it, and I think we as Star Trek fans love to talk and discuss and talk about what we liked and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it's good to engage in positive discussion, I think. But I guess when you think about it, each Star Trek show has always, when it's come out, met with a little bit of criticism. I mean, I'm sure, it's going back many years now, but obviously Next Generation met with some criticism when it first came out, from original Star Trek fans who were a bit scathing about it. But now, Next Generation has, warmed to everybody's hearts, and now it's kind of the classic series. The same way when DS9 came out, there was some criticisms about that in terms of being too dark and negative and so forth when compared to original series and Next Generation. So I think to a certain extent, every time a new Star Trek show has come out, there's always been a fair degree of, the comparison to what is beloved and what is... everybody holds dear in their heart. So I think providing our producers of the shows are definitely honouring what's come before and giving it that kudos and that respect that it deserves. That it's going to really be embraced by the fans, and that's I think that's the most important thing. Oh, I agree, Glenn. Season 1 had of Next Generation did have some serious issues. I think every show to a certain extent has issues in its first, couple of seasons. I think no shows at all are completely issue free in their first sort of season and a half. It always takes a show to a certain extent, at least a season to find its feet. But when you think about it, back in the day of Next Gen, back in the day of the original series, the internet didn't exist. We didn't have social media, we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have Instagram, all that sort of stuff. By the time conversations got out there about a new show, it was probably a season in. There was a far greater amount of time that a show had to find its feet. A show started, and by the time the chit-chat got out there into the public, the water cooler conversation, the producers had the chance to kind of fine-tune and improve. Whereas today, everybody is so wrapped up in instantaneous communication through social media and so forth. It's almost like if a show doesn't come out right from the very first or second episode and be absolutely brilliant and amazing, people will jump on it and go, "Oh, this is bloody rubbish! This isn't what I remembered. I'm switching off this." Whereas people I think forget to a certain extent that any show needs a little bit of feet finding time. That sort of time for the writers to kind of get into their groove, time for the actors to get into their groove, and for the show to really come of age, which each show needs a little bit of that breathing space and breathing time to kind of develop. So I think everybody needs to kind of, all the naysayers and all the cynical negative Nancys out there need to just give it a chance, give it a breath to come out and maybe see what the rest of us are seeing. And that's an outlook of watching a show from the beginning with an open mind. If you go into watching a show with an open mind, you won't be hideously disappointed. So many people, I think, went into watching Picard with their minds made up that they were going to hate it even before the first episode had aired. And when you convince yourself that you're going to hate something before it's even aired, then it's going to be very hard to convince yourself otherwise. And this is what's coming out a lot of the YouTube hatred and vitriol that a lot of YouTubers are spouting about Picard. These guys have had their minds made up even before one episode had aired, and nothing is going to convince them otherwise, because if they suddenly turn around and say, "No, I was completely wrong and I'm a bloody moron for saying all this trash talk about this show, which has actually turned out to be quite good," they would look foolish. So they kind of almost have to maintain this level of negativity in order to keep their credibility, perhaps. I'm not sure how it works. All I know is I went into watching Picard with a very open mind, and I've been very pleasantly surprised by by it and how it's progressing so far. And let's hope that it gets its 3 seasons and it tells all of the story that it needs to. Let's hope that our last 3 episodes of the show are very rewarding and satisfying, and all our little secrets and hints and theories all have some kind of payoff as we ramp towards the last 3 episodes of the show. So that's probably about it for today. We've been going for about an hour and a bit over an hour and a quarter on the live stream. Before we head off, is there any questions or any topics of conversation you guys would like to talk about before we finally wrap it up for the live stream for today? Let me just have a quick scan through the last couple of live chat messages. But I think, look, I'm really glad that you guys are enjoying the channel. I really appreciate your all your subscriptions, likes, comments, and shares, all that sort of stuff. And I appreciate everybody who's come along today to the live stream. We've had quite a few viewers today. I think we might have even had the most amount of viewers in a live stream before. So I'm going to try to do these live streams once a week on a Tuesday evening for you guys in the States. It's sort of lunchtime in Australia at the moment, but if I've got Tuesdays if I'm off, then I think I'm going to try to make Tuesday evening for you guys in the US and Canada and so forth, my sort of regular time for a weekly live stream. So I'm glad you've all enjoyed it and come along. And I appreciate everyone's viewership. And I shall see you guys next week for my next live stream. And obviously I'll be out later in the week with the usual... we've got a subscription. Maclid, thank you very much for subscribing, mate. Always good to have new subs come out of the chat and live stream. So appreciate that. All right, guys, we'll wrap it up now. Thanks so much for coming along to the live stream. Be sure to check out my review of episode 8 when it comes out later this week. Until my next review, I will see you guys then. Catch you later.